Hi there, everyone. My name is Josh Heath. I am the Chief Operations Officer of High Level Games, right? I am here doing today's Shutdown game design live stream. Today is the fourth one of these that we're doing. Going to be trying to talk about settings again. Yesterday, I was talking about settings and I was so tired I didn't really say anything that I wanted to say per se. You would think that maybe I would write notes or something like that for these, but no, trying to do them just off the top of my head, and hopefully some interesting stuff comes out of it, right? For those that are interested in supporting me and the products that I help produce, you can do so by going to highlevelgames.ca. That's highlevelgames.ca. That's the website. You can go there and check out some of the games that we have designed and that are out there on our website. Um, Today, I want to talk about building settings with a specific proposition, some an interesting, element of your setting, right? The thing that makes it stand out is the main goal of what I want to talk about today. And the truth is, it's okay to have a setting that doesn't stand out. And I know you're going to be like, what? How? That doesn't make any sense, Josh. That's the opposite of good advice, right? And it does. But let me finish the thought by saying, make the game that you want to play, right? Make the game that you want to create. It is okay to make your fantasy heartbreaker, right? If you want to rebuild D&D from the ground up and do something slightly different, then do that, right? Build the game that you want to build. If you are trying to build a game just because you think it will sell or because other people will play it and buy it, I mean, yes, that is a good plan to try to have something that is marketable, but recognize that not everything that you produce has to be marketable, right? It should be what you are interested in writing. The worst decisions I've ever made as a freelancer or a creator is convincing myself to write things that I wasn't actually interested in. One of the very first adventures that I wrote, that I pitched, I was not really into the idea. And it was such a struggle to write the 14,000 words that I had to write for that adventure. It was one of the worst experiences I've had as a game designer, right? And every time I've pitched a thing that, yes, sure, I could write, I could create, but if I wasn't into it, if I wasn't excited by it myself, then it wasn't ever going to be produced, right? So write something that interests you, write something that excites you. And then as you're creating your setting, add in things that make it distinctive, right? That make it different. I want to talk about Army Men as the first example of a setting that High Level Games has produced that has a particular setting and the values that I saw in the setting, right? So Army Men was written by Neil Litherland, and he pitched it to us at High Level Games and said, "Hey, I've got this game. I've written, about 85, 95% of it, a good chunk of it, and I need help getting it out the door, right?" And I loved this concept, right? In Army Men, you play the plastic army figures, right? Your characters are based on the stereotypes of those dollar store army men that you can buy. And that to me is cool, right? Army Men is cool because of that element, right? It's doing something that's kind of silly, a little bit obvious, right? Maybe that like a miniature tabletop role playing game could be focused on these characters, right? But it was the setting of Army Men to me that was the most interesting. In Army Men, the characters come from one of four or five different nations that are around the world that you're playing in. And it's unclear where that is. It's not the real world, right? One of the nations is similar to Russia pre Winter Revolution, pre communist Russia, right? Late Tsarist Russia is kind of the scheme of it. But the other nations are a mix of different places, right? The 1950s USA, some European elements of different countries, some Asian elements from different countries, right? These things are sort of layered into them, but they're not the real world, right? Per se. They might be. They might actually be, in some weird far-flung future where people have become little plastic resinous peoples, right? Um, but the setting is designed so you've got these tensions between these different nations and these soldiers from these various armies, right? That exist in proximity to each other and have been perpetually at war, right? The Warhammer 40K sort of perpetual war setting. But in Army Men, the proposition that brings you all together is that there are these bugs that are attacking. Now, I have a phobia of shelled bugs. And so the concept of producing this game shouldn't have worked for me. But I thought it was neat that the antagonists that are in Army Men are these bugs, these plastic dollar store bugs, right? Now, the bugs may or may not actually be plastic themselves. It's left kind of undistinguished in the setting whether they are or not. But these bugs attacking have organized all of the nations that were previously at war with one another to shift their focus, right? They are now focused on this common enemy. And that produces a setting where you have all of these historical ethnic tensions, and yet you have this common enemy that's bringing people slowly together, right, into this united polymeria. And I find that as a person with a background in ethnic conflict and conflict resolution, to me, the idea of these nations coming together and working with each other, that's really interesting to me, right? That's, to me, the setting proposition that's interesting, that's intriguing about Army Men, right? But you've also got layers of the questions that are kind of obvious that are there, right? Are we plastic? Our guns are made of plastic. We are made of plastic. Are we the same thing? Are we? Why have we been perpetually at war with one another? Right? What is the thing that is driving us to conflict with one another? How, now that we have these bugs that are attacking us, where are they coming from? What do they represent? Why are they there? Right? You can go into all of these existential questions with Army Men. And to me, as a veteran, I look at Army Men and I think this would be a great game for folks on active duty or who are veterans who want to kind of work through some of those thoughts about having served, right? I think Army Men presents a setting that allows you to do that, but it does so two steps removed, right? It's kind of a silly concept that you're playing plastic Army Men, but it lets you either be serious or silly with it, right? And you can create an entire campaign that is either of those, and it works equally as well, right? So the setting proposition, the cool setting idea in Army Men, is this tension, these tensions of who you are and what it means to be, as well as playing a tactical role-playing game where the combat is important, right? The type of weapons you use are important. The outcome of your combat matters to the greater world, right? Because there is this greater conflict going on. And all of that creates a really robust setting, right? But it's creating a tension, right? And creating a tension is important in any setting that you've got. You've got to have something that drives you as a narrator, as a game master, to come up with a plot line. The tension that your players can see and drives them also, right? They have to be able to look at the character options and be able to say, oh, this is the character I want to play because these are the dramatic tensions that I will be playing on, I will be working on, I will be building on as I'm creating my story, right? And in Army Men, you've got layers of that, right? You've got the different types of character classes that you can play. You've also got the different cultures that you can be from. These tensions let you dive deeply into that setting, right? And be able to create really fun stories, really engaging stories. So that's the proposition that I see in Army Men, is that tension. And what we're trying to build in there that I think is helpful for talking about settings, right, is you have layers of what players can connect to, the things they can build their story, their backstories on, and things that the game master and the players can help build into the story in a greater way. And I'm going to be going through some of the things that we produce as a way of grounding some of my conversation, some of my thoughts on this. And it's not necessarily a sales thing. It's a way of me framing and thinking about the various ideas that are here. The next setting is Archons of Nykud. So this is a Savage Worlds setting that we started producing in 2019, and the pandemic really knocked us off. We actually have most of the real full thing done, but it's just kind of in a weird space where it's not done. But we've got this jumpstart available, and the Archons of Nykud is designed as a powerful setting, like a more than standard Savage Worlds level of play, right? It's designed to be more epic than that. It's designed to be your characters are more tougher, right? The idea we had was almost like superheroes in a fantasy world, right? And everything in Archons of Nykud are based around these anthropomorphic peoples, right? I am, and no disparaging meant here, I'm not a furry, but it's weird how often I have worked on anthropomorphic books, right? I've worked on Pugmire, I've worked on Archons of Nykud, I worked on a game called Anthro Adventures. There's a bunch of anthropomorphic games that I've helped support in one shape or form or another. It's just a thing that's happened with my career, right? Archons of Nykud is designed to be a little gritty, right? The main empire that the Chatulim, or the Lion peoples, are connected to is based on Imperial Rome, right? It's not necessarily, you're not necessarily the good guys, right? If you're playing the Chatulim. But you're not necessarily the bad guys either, right? It's designed to be morally complex. And you've got, in our Jumpstart, we've got 4 different species that represent the major species that we wanted to engage with in the game. And the setting idea here, right, is you've got these fantasy species that have been living around this this area of various seas, right? And they have historical tensions that they have lived in, right? That's the thing, right? Building that world where these peoples are not in peace with each other, right? There is conflict, there's tension, there's all these issues that they have. But there's something deeper, right? There are these demons that exist in the world as well. And you play these Archons. The Archons have some abilities that are over and above the average person that make them stand out like superheroes, right? They're designed to be like superheroes in a fantasy world. And they are fighting these demons. And fighting these demons means going around and working with each other to make sure, because these demons are incredibly powerful. Now, lifting the hood a tiny bit to say these Archons are on the moon. That is where we set this without saying that that's where it's set. The seas that they are around are seas on the moon that, for whatever reason, have been terraformed. The people that live there, the demons they are fighting, are machines, right? They are nanobots that are infesting machines that they are fighting. And that produces the background ideas for other creatures that we create, right? Other demons. How do the Archons work, right? Why are they exalted? Well, they have some connection to these nanobots that are empowering their powers, right? And that produces lots of space to build from, right? The idea is it's a fantasy world, but there's a science fiction explanation for it. And you don't have to do that. You can have a completely fantasy world that it has just fantasy world logic. But it's Archons of Nykud's proposition. It's kicking off point that's interesting is it's this fantasy world with these weird sci-fi elements, right? We also included the fact that your species, your assumptions you might have about species are going to be wrong, right? That was our default proposition. The lions are heroic, but they're not good per se. You've got a group of spiders who are kind. The spiders weave these complex relationships with the people around them. They take care of their young. They are incredibly focused on caring for the young of any and all species, right? That is their driving proposition, is to protect, is to ensure that dangerous things do not harm them and their children. They have also had a historical periods for whatever reason, culturally, they have gone completely mad and destroyed large chunks of the world around them. So there's something there, right? There's some deeper story. There are also these octopus people, the Grimpotex. And the Grimpotex have more technology than the surface dwellers. They have these really neat steampunky sort of armor and ships that they can use, but they are practically completely unintelligible to the surface people. Like, their way of thinking and speaking is totally bizarre to everyone else. So they stand out when they try to interact with them as a threat, right? Because they are so bizarre. They talk about screaming and touching the eyes of their, erstwhile friends, right? Their way of speaking makes sense to them. It's how they interact with the world. But they're so alien, right? They're so bizarre and strange. So you've got all these tensions, right? You've got all these connections. And when you're building a setting, you want to produce enough of those tensions, right? There has to be different layers of things going on in the world, right? And they can be lots of various different things, but there should always be a dozen or more things that players can put their hat on and connect the character that they're playing to the greater world. So I want to talk about these two setting books, try to get them on the screen correctly. Snowhaven and Dealing with Your Demons. So Dealing with Your Demons is that adventure that I was talking about before, that I said I talked myself into writing something that I wasn't super excited about. I think the idea is really good. Really, really do, right? Dealing with Your Demons is a classic D&D adventure, right? It's for 5th edition D&D. It's a classic adventure designed where your first part of the adventure, the first real adventure in it, you are going into this temple, and there's some sort of demon to the player characters in there, and you defeat the demon and you loot the temple, right? And you get away, maybe. But the interesting thing is that's not a demon. That's a kobold angel. It is an angel that serves a series of kobold gods who are good, who are connected to dragons and are looking to make the world a better place. And you go in and you enter this ancient temple that's been destroyed for thousands of years, and this angel is the only remnant to this ancient kobold society, and you defeat it because it looks like a demon, right? And that's intentional. I wrote that in intentionally, right? Where you are supposed to misinterpret what you're seeing, and then deal with the consequences of that, right? You may defeat this demon, and then the kobolds who still live in the area but didn't know of this temple because it's ancient, they come after you, right? And so you have these series of encounters afterwards with these kobolds who righteously feel wronged, right? And feel harmed by your actions. And ultimately, you end up in the city of Parlardur. And the city used to belong to kobolds. thousands of years ago. The kobolds still live underneath the city. On the surface level of the city are your classic fantasy districts, right? There's a halfling district, an elven district, etc. And here, this second segment is about atonement, right? It is about finding out that you killed an angel and working to right that wrong and or making it worse, right? You can really go in either way with the elements that we've given you. But here's also where you find out that the angel at the beginning, you were hired to kill that angel. You didn't know that, by an evil deity that appears to be a halfling, right? And again, we're trying to, in this setting, kind of upturn standard expectations, right? That halflings are going to be good and they're going to, serve, a deity that makes warm biscuits in the morning, right? It's not quite Dark Sun level halflings, but there's some changing, some twisting to that stereotype that we're playing with there. And in this city of Parlardur, right, you have to go through and have these different interactions with kobolds and other people to kind of unravel all of this. Mystery is a strong word, but figure out what is going on, how you've ended up in this situation, and be able to actualize change in the world. In the setting thing, there is a standard fantasy setting, but we've intentionally set up stereotypes to demonstrate how they shouldn't hold up, right? How they won't hold up in this particular setting. And we've created layers with literally in the various places you're going to be to see some of these elements, right? Things are physically layered to produce that. So there's that. That's dealing with your demons. Snowhaven. Snowhaven's cool. I talked about Snowhaven yesterday. I know I've talked about Snowhaven before. Snowhaven is a snowpunk fantasy setting created by my friend Justin Weaver. He initially created it back during the 3.x era. Didn't publish anything. Everyone always asks, can I have the 3.x version of the game? And nothing got published, so no. But he came back to it with 5th edition, right? And he reached out to me, and he was living overseas at the time, and said, hey, can you take this and help make it into a coherent thing and publish it? And I said, fuck yeah, right? Heck yes, I would love to do that. Snowhaven is a city on the edge of the world that is frozen. It's a steampunk-ish setting, right? There are some steampunky elements to it to keep people warm in Snowhaven. But it was designed initially to be this really gritty socio-political treatise on a society that is controlled, right? You can't really leave Snowhaven unless you leave, right? Like, it's hard. When you're born there, it's hard to get out of there. Now, Justin and I are both from New England, and I will say if Snowhaven in any way represents anything, it is the sense of being stuck in small town New England. I'll let that sit and percolate for a second while I drink some tea. It's a thing, right? Being stuck in the snow, being stuck in the place can feel overwhelming. It can feel like there's so much going on that is restricting your ability to change the world. And that's what Snowhaven's design is, right? It's got these layers of socio-political issues, as well as this cool setting in the ice with these sort of steampunky elements. And I added a bit more to the setting with some writing from some other people. We included a Yeti species that are based in some ways on Tibetan mythology, and their connection. The Yeti as a being comes from that sort of mythological framework, right? So it's good to pull on that to build some world for them. And there's a great dragon, you can see the dragon on the cover here, that lives in the wastes outside of Snowhaven. There are other species that live in and around the area, like there's a whole species of mer people who are more like seal mer people, right? They're definitely designed for dark, cold waters, right? They're not a people that are friendly and nice as far as mer people go. But there's a lot in the setting, and the setting's proposition idea, right, is stuck in the snow in this city. What are the interesting adventure ideas around here, right? What are the things that grab people? And how do the politics play out, right? That's the setting of Snowhaven in a nutshell, right? In a ice cube, in a nice ball of snow for you to engage with. Um, Lots more if people wanted to check that out, right? The other games that are on here, or the other things that are listed on here, we've got all of our World of Darkness books. I produced a lot of World of Darkness stuff, right? I've got a couple of 5e adventures. I'll come back to those. We produced a lot of various supplements in the World of Darkness. And I want to just briefly talk about the setting ones. So I'm going to start with the 5th edition Vampire the Masquerade ones that have some interesting setting ideas, right? So A Crooked Smile is a chronicle that is set in a small town. Now, if you'll say, from a psychological perspective, I have a lot of problems with small towns. Yes, I have a lot of psychological baggage when it comes to having grown up in a very small town. And A Crooked Smile plays on that, right? It is set in a small town. You are designed to be a coterie of vampires who are coming from a city, have made some sort of deal with a Zemisi to check that you have to go to this small town to finish the deal, right? This is the Zemisi's lair, this small town. And you have to work through the fact that you have relationships in this small town as well, until you get to uncovering who this Zemisi is and either making a deal with him or realizing he has corrupted this entire town and you have to do something about that. So the setting idea here, right, is small town horror with these other layers to it, right? Like, what corruption is there? How does being in that small town play out in the greater scheme of running this game? And I think I love this adventure, right? I got some help from Dylan Haney for this adventure, and I think it's awesome, right? As a chronicle idea, I think it really lets you delve into the things I think are interesting about Vampire the Masquerade, right? Relationships, connections, etc. You could use this with May I Enter. I think it would work. You know what I mean? Almost verbatim, your characters would have slightly different relationships, as Vampire in Town would clearly be some sort of primordial that is capable of not being bound. But I think that would be interesting. And actually, having said that, maybe I will rewrite this for May I Enter at some point. I don't know. That's an idea. I'm not promising anything. The other chronicle that's here is Return to Sioris, and this is designed to be a D&D dungeon crawl in Vampire for people who are trying to learn the system, right? Sioris, for those who don't know, was the original chantry or like magical sanctum of the Tremere being magical vampires. And this setting, this tower was destroyed at some point. But why does it have to be, right? One of the interesting things is in the lore for Sioris, it's hidden from human view. So it may just, the magic that hides it may just have kept it hidden, right? And uncovering the secrets within it is interesting, right? One of the best books, in my opinion, from the Dark Ages line of Vampire the Masquerade was House of Tremere, which is all about Sioris, right? And it's all about the horrible things that are happening inside it. Now, for those who go and read House of Tremere, I'm going to give you trigger warnings, right? Like, all of them. It's kind of, it's not a it's not a book I'd recommend for kids. It's not a book I'd recommend for adults who don't want to deal with really dark subjects, right? Um, so, Return to Sioris touches on some of those things, but it doesn't dive as deeply into the dark with them. But it produces enough connections. It includes enough connections that if you have that book, House of Tremere, you can layer those into the story, right? But it's designed as a dungeon crawl. It's designed to show people this is in a classic D&D sort of sense. You can engage with this content and see the differences with Vampire the Masquerade, the connections that you have to build, the relationships and how those tensions are really important to the drama of a Vampire the Masquerade game. But the setting there is this specific place, this great tower, this magical tower, and its dungeons. The next book I want to talk about, probably the last ones I want to talk about here, are Dark New England and then Descendants of the Three Sisters. Descendants of the Three Sisters was written mostly by Lisa Elwood, my late friend Lisa, who she was Nanticoke and Lenape, and she and I talked about what if there were vampire clans that were Native American, right? And so we created 3 Native American clans. We left it open that they were bloodlines as opposed to clans, right? Like that's the design principle that I followed, is if someone was like, no, there clearly can't be separate clans, I'm going to assume that they are bloodlines, right? You can read them that way, right? If it bothers you that we said they were 3 totally new clans. But we gave them a different origin story that was based in native myth and native tradition, I should say, in a way that I think is really cool. It's really interesting. I think it is that on its own, as a setting idea, Descendants of the Three Sisters is one I recommend for people just to see what you can do with adding new stuff to Vampire, right? But it's part of this dark New England setting, right? These 3 native clans are largely found in the New England area, and I'm from New England, so I spent a lot of time when the Storytellers Vault first launched thinking about what setting I would want to really build on. And Dark Colony was a book that I hated from first edition Vampire. Absolutely thought it was trash, right? And people disagree with me. Some people love the book. I did not. I felt like whoever wrote it had never been to New England. And it just felt like they focused on Salem and not much else, right? It really didn't feel lived in. It didn't feel very deep. So I wanted to deepen the story, right? And the thing about New England is not big enough, right? The population is not large enough to sustain a lot of vampires if they stay in the cities, right? So the vampires in Dark New England travel, right, in careful ways around New England. And that changes the way vampires work to some degree, but it also allows for more of them to exist and these tensions to exist because they're kind of like moving and twisting around each other. And several vampires build these small town enclaves for themselves. And I go through each of the states, Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and tell you who's there, what they're doing, right? And we pull deeply on existing Vampire the Masquerade lore. This was produced before 5th edition, so some of the lore doesn't match 5th edition. It doesn't match Beckett's Jihad Diary, which came out around the same time that this came out, actually. And that's fine, right? I recognize, I live with that it's an alternate history, right? And I hope that other people get that, enjoy that as well. But Dark New England also has these 3 Native American clans in it, right? And they've been hiding in plain sight since colonial times, right? And the impact of European settlement on them has been huge, has been devastating. but they persist, right? They persist, and they have these connections, and they have deep roots to the Vampire the Masquerade lore. One of the major clans is each of the major clans, those three clans, has an elder who is connected to one of the various major groups in Vampire, right? There's one, Sano, who is connected to the Sabbat, right? And I built in her connections into the Sabbat lore, because Sabbat lore has all this information about how the Sabbat has taken Native American rituals and built them into their rituals. And there's never really a lot of context. There's never really a lot of information about that. And I was like, well, what would that look like, and why would they have that? The answer is they have that because they have a really powerful Native elder who is part of the Sabbat, right? And the reason she is part of the Sabbat is because she sees a lot of danger in the antediluvians, right? In those ancient, for her, the like extreme expression of settler colonialism. And then one of them, one of the elders is connected to the Camarilla. She has built a long-standing princedom in Connecticut, where she, maybe Rhode Island, actually, I can't remember, either Connecticut or Rhode Island, right? And she's built this princedom, this fiefdom around herself protectively, right? And she protects her brood, and she protects the members of her clan while pretending to be a standard Camarilla clan member, right? And then the third one is a upstart who he actually was in torpor for a really long time, is just woken up and has seen the world around him and is pissed, right? Super angry. Up in Vermont, there's like 12 cows and this vampire dude, right? But he's working to build this anarch group to disrupt everything around them, right? I think he's fascinating. I think the storyline in Descendants of the Three Sisters is amazing. I highly recommend reading Dark New England and or Descendants of the Three Sisters. I will tell you now that Descendants of the Three Sisters, almost the entire content is in Dark New England. The biggest difference is there are a bunch of pre-made characters in Descendants that aren't in Dark New England, so you don't necessarily need to get both of those. Anyway, so the setting ideas there, I think, are pretty clear, right? We're playing on an existing setting and adding depth to it, building elements into it. We also have a bunch of these one-page adventures. These one-page adventures all have their own little setting ideas in them, right? And I recommend people check those out and just you can see the little tiny bits of building that are included in there. You don't always have to build big, right? You can build small setting information can be just as powerful in giving people a hook as really in-depth setting building. Where and how you build your setting is going to, it's gonna fall to you in one way, shape, or form, right? To decide how much is enough. And I always recommend to people, write as much as you need, not more than you need, right? Not less than you need, right? Just as much as you need. If you ever are writing and you get to a point and you're like, I gave myself an 8,000 word count, and you get to 6,000 and you're like, nah, I said everything I want to say, stop. It's okay to stop when you feel like I've written enough about this. You never feel like you have to write more because you're going to overwrite, right? But when you're producing that setting, think about what's the interesting tidbit that you're adding to this. If you are retreading existing things, how are you making them your own? And then how are you, what do you expect people to do in your setting, right? Provide opportunities, ideas for kicking off points for people to do something, right, in your setting. Run a adventure, run a whole chronicle, right? Run a whole story. You have to give people enough of those leaping off points to be able to do that. So those are my big highlights about setting today, framed through the various things that High Level Games has produced. I feel like there's more about setting that I will probably dive into. I think tomorrow's episode will probably focus on something different, like freelancing, for example, or something like that. I haven't decided yet. Probably will decide first thing tomorrow morning or maybe sometime later today. I'll figure it out. I'm bringing this one to a close underneath the hour. I know I usually do these for an hour in theory, but we're figuring it out, and I've got something that's happening at noon, so it's good to give myself a little bit of a break. As mentioned, doing this because of the government shutdown, currently doing okay, not putting, Venmo links or PayPal links or anything like that in there yet, but keep an eye on those folks who who may be furloughed like myself and may need some support. I recommend that you reach out to engage those folks. If I need anything from my amazing audience, from the folks who keep an eye on High Level Games, I will let you know. Thank you very much for listening to this. And if you have any thoughts, concerns, ideas, if this, pushes you to write something, please let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe, do all those different things. So have a wonderful day.